Hi team. So in today's episode, I want to talk about conditioning, how habits, environment, and social conditioning can influence the way that we live our lives, and accepting that conditioning can work in a positive or a negative way, depending on your awareness of it and your ability to adapt to create the best possible scenarios for you to live the best possible kind of life for you. And so let's get into it.
Thinking Differently with Andy Franklin.
So first thing I want to talk about is habits. Habits are incredibly powerful. They're what our brains and bodies love. They take away cognitive load by outsourcing it to a repeated pattern of events. And conditioning can work on many different levels, but it's mainly driven through senses. I'm sure you've had the experience of walking into a room and smelling a certain thing and it taking you back to a memory or a feeling within your body based on that smell. And I personally have smells that can make me feel a different way, can create a different emotional response within me. For example, Soil always makes me calm. I don't know what it is, but something about the combination of eucalyptus and tea tree oil means that for my brain and the way that it's wired and my personal upbringing, that smell is always relaxing to me. And this conditioning plays out by us having these unconscious habits that pop up, and if we're not aware of them, can control a lot of our lives by us doing things without us consciously thinking about them. The example that comes to mind is that I stopped smoking about 15 years ago. And so what you find when you stop smoking is that a lot of the habits that you have around smoking are broken very quickly. So the first cigarette in the morning, or the cigarette that I would always have when I walked from the train to work, or the first cigarette after a meal. All of those habits are broken very quickly because I rewired my brain. So after 3 or 4 days, I no longer got those triggers, those conditioned behaviors based on what I had been doing for many years. And yet, some of the unconscious ones that I hadn't managed to recondition yet were still there. So even 4 or 5 years after I stopped smoking, I got out of a swimming pool on holiday. I sat on the edge of the sun lounger to let the sun dry me. And all of a sudden, I got this incredible urge for a cigarette. I obviously didn't want a cigarette, but just the fact that that habit was still there, because I hadn't conditioned myself out of that behavior, because I hadn't done it enough times in a new way to realize that that wasn't my behavior anymore, was really interesting. And had I not been aware of that, I could have quite easily just gone along with that conditioning rather than stopping myself and saying, well, that's not what I do anymore. And so, are habits good or bad? I think that very much depends on what the habit is. On the one hand, we can use all of these conditioned behaviors in our favor. So we can use our ability to condition ourselves to be able to make better choices. So they say when it comes to sleep that the only thing you should do in your bedroom is sleep, because that conditions your brain into knowing that when you walk into your bedroom, it's time for sleep. You don't have any screens in there, you don't have a TV in there, you don't have any particularly exciting art on the wall, or any other things that you might do in your bedroom bar one. You should probably try and make sure that you do elsewhere. And they even use this as insomnia advice. If you're really struggling to sleep and you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't get back to sleep, what they tell you to do is actually get up and go out of the room. Do something else until you feel tired again, and then go back into the room to sleep. Because that conditioning of your body knowing that your bedroom is where you sleep is critical to being able to trigger the right patterns in your body to relax yourself in order to sleep where you need to sleep. And then the other thing that I was thinking with this conditioning piece is how it's impacted by things outside of our control. The example that I was thinking with this is the whole working from home thing. So previously, people were conditioned to go into the office. That's just where you worked. So you accepted the fact that the train was busy. You accepted the fact that it was noisy and loud in your office, and open plan offices don't work for everybody, and you would go home and you would be completely overexposed and you would have a massive amount of sensory overload. But we were just conditioned to accept that that was it. That was the way that everything had to be done. And then COVID came along and it showed us a different way. It showed us that we could work from home and we could work just as well in a comfortable space where we get to drink our own coffee and use our own toilet. And we realized that actually this is the space that we're comfortable in. This is the space that we want to work now. And I think possibly that's one of the reasons that there's such a big pushback to going back into the office. For me, at least, I don't see any really valid reasons that anybody's given for going back into that environment. Because what I think a lot of the people asking us to do this are not understanding is that they're asking us to recondition ourselves to something that we have now moved away from. They're asking us to be uncomfortable in that space again until we get to the position where that's the norm. But there's a bit of our brains that knows that that's not the only way anymore. That doesn't have to be the norm. I heard this great thing on a podcast recently where they were talking about the fact that there is less tolerance in people that live in big cities for other people around them. And the reason that they gave for this was because if you live in a small town and that's just where you grow up, this assumed acceptance that everybody just is how they are, and you accept that because that's just the way that they've always been. Whereas when you've moved away, when you've moved to a big city, you know that you can move and you know that other people can move. So what that does is it gives you this ability to say, this isn't how it has to be. And as soon as you know that this isn't how it has to be, then you can be a lot more dissatisfied by the fact that it is this way. And I think that's what's happening with the working from home thing. This combination of realizing that that's not the only way anymore, to go in to the office and be uncomfortable and have to put up with all of those other things. And then also the lack of a really good reason why people want you back in the office. The idea that it's going to create a better community, I don't think has necessarily been researched and plays out. I feel like it's more about control. It's more about people not believing that we're working hard enough, or not believing that we are pushing ourselves to the absolute limit when we're in a more comfortable environment. And while that might be true for some people, I would argue that for me personally, I'm a lot more productive at home because someone can't wander over to my desk randomly and distract me when I'm in the middle of something. And so then moving on to the idea of social conditioning, that for me is another way of describing comparison. It's this idea that because everybody else does it, you have to do it too. And while I think there are some benefits of that in terms of social constructs and law and behaving in certain ways, I think there's a lot of downsides to that too. There's a lot of ways that you would probably behave if you didn't worry about being judged by society. And this social conditioning of having to follow a certain structure, a certain path, having to buy a house and then buy a bigger house, or get a job and then keep getting promoted. The idea that we always have to be striving for more. All of these are socially conditioned ideas. Even the idea of masculine and feminine, which I talked about in one of my other episodes. That's a socially conditioned idea. And if we can move away from those and see the nuance in things around us more, I think that would probably benefit us all in understanding that everybody is an individual in their own right, rather than having to adhere to social conditioning and social norms. And it drives us to feeling like we're in a race, but we don't really know what the race is about. We're just racing, and we don't know where the end goal is. We don't know where the finish line is, but someone's just told us that we need to take part in this race. So we're all just running. And I think for me personally, the more I investigate my own values and my own joy and happiness in life, the more I am driven to move away from the social conditioning, move away from the social norms that keep us all in boxes and keep us doing the same things, and actually accept that I might want to do things differently. I might be comfortable taking a lower job with a lower salary if it gives me more time in nature. I might be okay with going for a walk in a park and taking my shoes and socks off so I can walk on the grass, even if people look at me funny. And so I think comparison pushes us to feel like we always have to keep up, or at least makes us feel like we can't fall behind. We can't take a different path because we're going to fall behind all of our peers and we're going to be judged for that. Whereas in reality, that different path might be a shortcut, or it might just take us to a completely different place that only we want to go, and it doesn't matter about where everybody else is going. And so how do we form habits that are beneficial to us? How do we use this conditioning in our favour? So a recent study suggested that habits take about 60 days to form. So I think we need to give ourselves a bit of a boost. We need to give ourselves a bit of an advantage if we're going to try and create new habits for ourselves. And we can do this by using our environment around us in our favour. So the obvious example is, if you don't want to spend all of your time in bed playing on your phone, then you absolutely can try and create a habit to just not pick up your phone in the morning when you're in bed. But realistically, willpower will get in the way, or you'll be really tired, or there'll be something that you just need to look at. So in order to create that habit, it's better to use something physical to block you. And so the best idea with that one is actually just don't keep your phone in your room. The difference that it makes to me, keeping my phone in a different room when I'm asleep, is that I absolutely could still get up, get my phone and take it back to bed. But the reality is most of the time I don't, because as soon as I've got up out of bed, I then don't need to get back into bed with my phone. And I heard somebody else talking about the fact that when they're using social media, they only allow themselves to look at social media when they are stood in a very specific area of their house, and they're not allowed to sit down when they're doing it. So rather than just telling yourself you're not going to look at social media anymore, and then realizing that actually your willpower caved because it was 10 p.m. on a Friday night, and you've been randomly scrolling Instagram for 2 hours without even realizing. By creating this physical habit that goes with the behavior that you want to change, it means that you condition your body much quicker to realizing that that is the only place that you're allowed to do a thing. And so it will naturally bring your usage down, because actually it's really uncomfortable if you want to have a quick look at Instagram to walk into a certain area of your house and then have to stand up the whole time that you're doing it. The same with conditioning yourself into not eating the things that you probably shouldn't be eating. I know that I have a habit at the moment for wanting something sweet after I've eaten. So anytime I've eaten a savoury meal of lunch or dinner, I then instantly want something sweet. And so now, because I've done that for quite a few years, my brain is conditioned to expect that. And it's even at the point where after I've eaten a delicious meal, after a couple of minutes, my mouth will taste really bad because my brain expects something sweet and I still have a savoury taste in my mouth. And so again, I absolutely could expect my willpower to take me to this place where, right, I'm not going to eat any sweets after dinner anymore. But realistically, there will always be days where you're more tired or you're more drained or you just really want that sweet thing. And so you will go back to it if that sweet thing is available. So again, a couple of habits my wife and I use all of the time to avoid this, or avoid overeating sweet things in the evening, is number one, we just don't buy the thing, because it's a lot easier using your willpower to not buy it once than it is using your willpower every single day to not eat it if it's in the cupboard. And the second way is that if you do have those sweet things in the house and you want to restrict the amount that you're eating, rather than taking a whole bag of sweets into the living room with you while you watch TV and not even being aware of how much you're eating, you can make a small pot. You can take 3 sweets out of the kitchen, leave the bag in the kitchen, and take those 3 sweets into the living room. Because again, your body may tell you that you want more, but you might just not get up and get some more because it's an extra level of friction that you're putting into the process in order to help you build that habit. The other thing that you can do with habits is this idea of habit stacking. So if there is something that you already do, that you already have a habit formed for, and you want to start doing something else, you can tag those 2 things together. So this might be, you really want to start stretching your calves out more because they're always really stiff when you get into bed at night. And so what you do is you just tag that experience, that thing that you want to do, in with something that you already do, like brush your teeth just before bed. What that then does is it uses those 2 habits to work with each other. And so I end up going and brushing my teeth, and then I instantly start stretching my calves out because I have linked those 2 habits together. And so even though I wouldn't necessarily think every night I need to stretch my calves out, I do think every night I need to brush my teeth before bed. And so those 2 things are intrinsically linked. And the other really cool one is this idea of giving yourself something that you really want only when you're doing something that you don't want as much. So the example here would be that you're only allowed to listen to your favorite podcast or watch your favorite TV program when you are exercising in the gym. And that way, you get the dopamine hit of the thing that you want to do while you're doing the thing that maybe you don't want to do as much. And that helps you form the habit, which takes longer to form on its own and is less likely to be possible if you're just trying to use your willpower to stick at something. And so I think in conclusion on this one, conditioning is something that's natural and innate for all of us. We are naturally exposed to societal conditioning and individual conditioning throughout our lives. And the key here is to be aware of all of these things and take them apart and examine them in order to see which ones are the ones that we want to keep and which ones are the ones that we want to throw away. We have to align our conditioning with our values and understand which part of it is something that we care about. We can do that through journaling or meditation or just being present in the moment and being aware of the things that come up and questioning whether or not we are or aren't doing something based on what we've been told rather than what we believe. And so I challenge you to question your own habits and your own conditioning. See where you do things without thinking about them, where you might be able to challenge the things that you don't care about as much, and tap into the ones that you do. Use those to leverage your ability to form habits, to create greater and greater cycles of things that you do want to do. And so let me know in the comments if you have used any of these habit creating hacks before, if any of them particularly stand out to you, or if there's any that I've missed that you would recommend that I start trying to use as well in order to incorporate more positive things into my life and move away from more negative habits that might have been created by conditioning that was outside of my control. And with that, I'll sign off for today. So thanks for listening and take care.